Something is clearly changing inside the Philadelphia Eagles offense heading into 2026, and the most important part about it is that Jalen Hurts is not resisting the change at all. In fact, according to everything coming out of South Philadelphia right now, he's embracing it completely, and that could end up being one of the biggest reasons this team becomes dangerous again when the season starts. What's fascinating is that this is not just a small tweak to the offense. This is a major philosophical adjustment for a quarterback who has already reached the highest level possible in the NFL, playing a very specific style of football. Hurts has been to multiple Super Bowls, he has won the biggest games, and he has built his identity in a shotgun-heavy offense that relied on vertical shots, explosive plays, quarterback mobility, and improvisation. Now the Eagles are preparing to ask him to do more under center, use more play action, attack the middle of the field more consistently, and operate with quicker timing concepts. And somehow, instead of pushing back against all those adjustments, Hurts sounds more energized than ever. That is what should grab the attention of Eagles fans right now. Reports surrounding Hurts and new offensive coordinator Sean Mannion continue to describe a quarterback who is fully bought into the system. The chemistry between the two is reportedly building fast, and you can already see signs of Hurts treating this offseason differently. He has been working extensively with his receivers away from the facility, building timing with players like DeVonta Smith and Elijah Moore while preparing for this new look attack. That matters because this is not a quarterback trying to protect his comfort zone anymore. This is a veteran trying to evolve. And honestly, when you go back and really study the Eagles offense from 2025, the evidence is there that this approach can work extremely well for Hurts. The strange part about last season is that whenever the Eagles truly committed to under center concepts and heavy play action, the offense looked smoother, more controlled, and far more efficient. The best stretches Hurts played all year came in games where the offense leaned heavily into that structure. The wins over the Vikings, Giants, Raiders, and Commanders showed flashes of an offense that looked balanced, rhythmic, and incredibly difficult to defend. In those games, Hurts was decisive, accurate, and composed. He attacked outside the pocket, threw with anticipation, and looked far more comfortable operating in rhythm than many people expected. The numbers from those performances are hard to ignore. Across those dominant wins, Hurts threw 12 touchdown passes without a single interception, while completing nearly 78% of his passes. That is not random. That is not a coincidence. The tape showed a quarterback benefiting from the design of the offense rather than carrying the entire structure on his back every snap. The play action concepts helped simplify reads, move defenders out of position, and allowed Hurts to attack space with confidence. It also created cleaner throwing lanes, especially when rolling outside the pocket, something that has always helped him see the field more clearly. What makes this even more interesting is how perfectly the current personnel fits this style of offense. Without A.J. Brown likely remaining on the roster after June 1st, the Eagles are clearly shifting toward a different offensive identity, and surprisingly, that may not be a bad thing at all. DeVonta Smith could become the biggest beneficiary of these changes because his route running precision and timing make him ideal for a play-action heavy passing game. Dallas Goedert also becomes extremely valuable in this system because tight ends thrive attacking intermediate areas off under center concepts. And of course, Saquon Barkley becomes a nightmare in these formations because every defense will be forced to respect the threat of the run. That is why there is still a real belief that the Eagles possess one of the most dangerous playoff offensive cores in football even without A.J. Brown. It sounds crazy at first because A.J. is still an elite talent, but when you look specifically at postseason football, the trio of DeVonta Smith, Saquon Barkley, and Dallas Goedert might actually be one of the most reliable groups in the NFL. These are players who consistently elevate their performances when the pressure is highest. Smith and Goedert already rank among the most productive playoff weapons in franchise history. Barkley proved during the Super Bowl run that he can completely take over games physically and emotionally. Even when defenses focus entirely on stopping him, his presence changes everything, and that is the part many people are overlooking about this Eagles team heading into 2026. The regular season may look different without A.J. Brown dominating headlines, but playoff football is about composure, execution, and players who rise in critical moments. The Eagles still have those players everywhere on offense. Hurts has repeatedly shown he becomes a different quarterback in the postseason. Smith has delivered in massive games. Goedert has consistently been one of the most dependable playoff performers this franchise has had in years. Barkley brings the kind of physical dominance that travels in January football. There is also another layer to all of this that makes the situation even more compelling. Hurts himself reportedly wanted the offense to become more balanced after the collapse in 2023. He was frustrated with how dependent the passing attack became on deep vertical concepts and wanted more versatility built into the scheme. That completely destroys the idea that he is unwilling to adapt or resistant to coaching. Everything we are seeing now points toward a quarterback who understands exactly where his game needed to grow and is finally getting an offensive structure designed to help him evolve naturally instead of forcing him into uncomfortable situations every week. Inside the building, there seems to be a different energy around this offense right now. The Eagles are not simply trying to recreate what worked in previous seasons. They are building something that feels more sustainable, more balanced, and potentially more dangerous in big moments. And if Hurts truly masters this style of offense while keeping his mobility and playmaking ability intact, this team could become much harder to defend than people realize entering 2026. The biggest question now is whether this transformation will actually unlock the best version of Jalen Hurts we have ever seen, or if the offense will struggle adjusting to such a major identity shift once the season begins. What do you think, Eagles fans? Is this new offensive direction exactly what the team needed, or are the Eagles taking too big of a risk changing so much around their franchise quarterback? What makes this situation even more intriguing is that the Eagles are not entering 2026 like a team trying to survive after losing a superstar. They are acting like a franchise that already knows exactly what its next evolution is supposed to look like. That is why the confidence surrounding this offense feels real instead of forced. When you hear the conversations coming out of Philadelphia right now, nobody inside the organization sounds panicked about life after A.J. Brown. Instead, the focus keeps returning to versatility, timing, efficiency, and playoff football. That tells you the Eagles believe they can win differently now, and honestly, there are reasons to believe they might be right. One of the biggest reasons is the mentality of this team. For all the criticism the Eagles received during stretches of inconsistency over the last few years, one thing has remained true almost every season of the Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts era. They always find ways to get into the postseason. This franchise has built one of the highest floors in the NFL. Since 2017, the Eagles have consistently remained in the playoff picture no matter how chaotic things became around them. Coaching changes, roster turnover, offensive collapses, defensive issues, injuries. Somehow this team keeps getting back into the tournament, and once they get there, the entire identity changes. That is why the conversation about DeVonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, and Saquon Barkley matters so much. These are not just talented players. These are postseason players. There is a difference. During the regular season, flashy offenses can dominate with explosive statistics and highlight plays. But in January, games slow down, defenses tighten, every possession becomes more physical, every mistake becomes magnified, and in those moments, teams rely on players they trust emotionally as much as physically. The Eagles still have those players everywhere on offense. Look at DeVonta Smith specifically. There may not be a more underrated big game receiver in football right now. Every postseason run seems to include another stretch where Smith quietly becomes the most reliable player on the field. He consistently wins against tight coverage, creates separation in critical downs, and delivers momentum-changing catches without needing massive volume. That is exactly the kind of receiver who becomes even more dangerous in a system built around timing, precision, and play action. If this new offense truly emphasizes rhythm passing and middle-of-the-field concepts, Smith could end up having one of the most efficient seasons of his career. Dallas Goedert might benefit even more. Tight ends thrive in offenses that force linebackers and safeties to hesitate for even a second, and under center play action creates those moments constantly. Defenses freeze, worrying about Saquon Barkley. Hurts rolls outside the pocket, and suddenly Goedert is attacking space behind the linebackers. We already saw flashes of how effective that looked in 2025 whenever the Eagles committed to it. Goedert has always been one of the toughest matchups in football when healthy because he combines physicality with underrated route running ability. In playoff games especially, he has repeatedly delivered huge performances when the offense needed stability. And then there is Barkley, who honestly may become the centerpiece of everything. What made Saquon so dangerous during the Eagles' championship run was not just his explosiveness as a runner, it was the emotional pressure he placed on defenses. Every defensive coordinator became obsessed with stopping him, and that obsession created opportunities everywhere else. Even in games where Barkley did not completely dominate statistically, defenses defenses still tilted toward him constantly. That attention opened throwing lanes, isolated receivers, and simplified reads for Hurts. In a heavier play-action offense, that effect could become even stronger. The scary part for opposing defenses is that this system may actually help preserve Hurts physically while maximizing his strengths mentally. Instead of forcing him into pure shotgun football every drive, the Eagles can now attack defenses from multiple structures. They can still use read option concepts, designed quarterback runs, and RPO packages, but now those elements become complementary instead of foundational. That balance could make the offense much less predictable. Defenses spent years preparing for one version of the Eagles' offense. Now they may have to defend several versions at once. There is also something else happening here that fans should not ignore. Hurts sounds refreshed. That matters more than people realize. Last year, there were moments where the offense felt tense, disconnected, and overly dependent on individual talent rescuing broken drives. This offseason feels different. Reports surrounding Hurts describe somebody energized by learning again instead of simply maintaining what already existed. That can completely change the atmosphere of a locker room. When the quarterback buys into change publicly and enthusiastically, the entire offense tends to follow. You can already see signs of leadership from Hurts during these offseason workouts away from the facility. He is organizing throwing sessions, working extensively with pass catchers, and building chemistry early instead of waiting for training camp. That level of commitment becomes extremely important when installing a new offensive identity because timing offenses demand repetition. Every detail matters. Footwork matters. Route depth matters. Timing windows matter. The fact that Hurts appears fully invested in mastering those details should excite Eagles fans far more than any offseason headline. And maybe the most important part of all this is that the Eagles are not abandoning what made Hurts special in the first place. They are not trying to turn him into a stationary pocket passer. His mobility will still be central to the offense. The shotgun game will still exist. The read option will still exist. Designed quarterback runs will still exist. The difference is that now those plays may become even harder to stop because defenses can no longer predict when they are coming. That unpredictability is exactly what separates good offenses from championship offenses. The NFL constantly changes, and the